everyone, Jess here from the Scrappy Sisters, and I am coming to you with another Kitaholic Kits design team layout. Now for this layout I have got my Versamarks and that really gorgeous stencil that came in the kit, and I am just smushing that through the stencil. For those of you that might not do very much embossing, the Versamarks is basically an embossing glue, and so you just squish that glue through the stencil there. And it comes out a little bit hit or miss. Sometimes it comes out perfectly and sometimes it comes out a bit patchy, but that's all kind of part of the look. If you want to get it a little bit more perfect, you probably would be better off to maybe use a dauber. Or if you can see that black texture looking thing up on the top right of my camera there near the scissors, that's actually a Versamarks texture, so a glue texture, and that would definitely give a more defined and more specific way of drawing those little hearts. So I'm using clear embossing powder today, and obviously I'm going to hit that with my heat gun in just a minute to activate that powder. And then I'm actually going to go in again, and I'm going to do this off camera, but I'm going to go in again with my white embossing. And so there's going to be clear embossed hearts and white embossed hearts. And then once I've done that, I come on and splodge on a little bit of watercolour. Now the embossed hearts repel the watercolour, and I just really love that gorgeous effect of having those watercolour hearts sort of shining through underneath your watercolor mixed media. Now I'm hitting that with my heat gun to sort of quicken up the drying process, just because I was being lazy and didn't want to keep waiting. And as I said, I'm not really thinking too much about where this watercolor is going. I know I've got quite a reasonable size cut file that's going to go on top of the watercolor. And so I'm just sort of splodging it on a little bit here and a little bit there. And so once I've done that, I then bring in the Heidi Swap Colour Shine in gold and splat that onto the page as well. Now, when you splat on your Colour Shine when your mixed media is still wet, especially a water-based mixed media like this watercolor, it will sort of bleed and run a little bit like the watercolors themselves. So I really love the effect that has when you put that on while it's still wet. So now I'm going to get ready. It's the next day, so that's well and truly dried, and I'm going to get ready with the rest of my layout. So to make the layout, I've decided I'm going to matte my mixed media paper. So I've got that beautiful pink and peach paper here that I'm just gutting, because that's going to be the frame, the mat that goes with my mixed media page. And I'm just gutting that out now so I can save the rest of that paper for another day. Now, sorry if you can hear my kids in the background. My eldest has just gone outside and he's singing and playing outside. And my youngest has just realised that he's no longer with me. He was with me, but he chose to crawl away. And now he's decided that he's not happy about that. But hopefully he realises that Daddy's pretty good and Daddy's pretty fun, and that he will be able to manage being with just Daddy. So I'm just using the double-sided tape there to stick my paper to my mat, and you'll notice that it is a little bit warped. I don't own gesso, so I wasn't able to prep my paper, and as you know, the more sort of water-based the material, the mixed media material that you're using, the more water is going to be absorbed by your paper, and so therefore the more warped it's going to get. So obviously watercolor paints do get quite wet, quite a lot of water in those, and so therefore it does cause my paper to warp. So I obviously have the option of using gesso or pulling out the iron if I so desire. You do maybe test that first, don't just chuck an iron on your page. I have done it before and I've had no problems, but I highly recommend you testing it first. Just if you do use your iron, I tend to iron the back and make sure my iron is empty of all water first. But I just left it be. It wasn't too warped, and especially once I stuck that down to my mat, it didn't warp too much. Now, Another little tip from me, a little bit of cost saving measure here. I really wanted vellum in the background of my page to sort of soften down those watercolors. And I went over to Officeworks to price vellum. And vellum was about $20 for 25 sheets, so almost $1 a sheet, which is really quite expensive. But what I am using here is actually tracing paper. Now, the vellum I priced at $20 a sheet was A4 size, so I did end up purchasing A4 tracing paper. Now, this tracing paper was $7 for a packet of 25, so a much better option. I could have paid $13 for an A5 piece of paper, and in hindsight I do wish I had have done that, because I am now trying to conceal the join of two A4 bits of papers to cover a full 12 by 12, but I manage it in this particular layout, so I'm sure it will be fine. Again, if more things to share, if you are wondering about that cut file, I actually created that myself. It is I went onto the internet and googled royalty free tricycle, so to make sure I was using an image of the internet that is available, is not it's one that's royalty free. It's not owned by a person. And yeah, got a picture of the tricycle, and I then went into the Silhouette Studio store, Design Studio, and had to do quite a bit of tweaking to get that ready, erasing a lot of the extra bits and bobs that weren't necessary to make a basic cut file. But I really wanted the tricycle to go with these photos. I've then added in our Kitaholic Kits exclusive cut files we received for the month. Virginia had her Messy Daisies, I think it was called, cut file that she created, and I printed out a couple of those and backed those for a different layout and didn't end up using them. So I've since cut them apart, and I'm using those to jazz up the baskets and jazz up the embellishments around the photo. Now, snap, I have added on my title. So this title was a little bit fiddly because part of it is stuck up on the cut file, and the other part would be sitting flat on the ground. So I did have to get some foam to back behind my thickers there. So that took a little bit of time. So I did do that off camera. I apologize. And I should mention earlier, I also matted my photographs off camera. So the whole cut file is popped up on foam, and the entire photos are popped up on foam. And to attach the tracing paper to the page, I put double-sided tape exactly behind where the photos and the cut file were. So it is loose at the corners because I didn't want you to be able to see the adhesive. It's going to go in a plastic pocket, so it doesn't matter if the corners are a little bit loose. They'll all be secured once they're inside the plastic pocket anyway. Now, to jazz up Virginia's, I'm just going to call them that because she's the lady who created the cut files. To jazz up Virginia's daisy cut file, I put little enamel dots in the center of each of the flowers just to give those a little bit of a lift. And then it is time to add on a few embellishments. Now, I didn't want too much happening on this page because the watercolor background and the cut file itself is quite busy, but I knew it needed a little bit more black to tie in with my son's pants and the shadow and the wheels and all of that that's happening around the tricycle. So I put on these two grey butterflies that I fussy cut from the beautiful butterfly paper that's part of the collection. And just popped those up on some foam, and you'll see then I just added a little bit of sticky tape behind that that butterfly just to help secure the tracing paper down to the page as well. So that's why down the bottom here I'm adding that little word sentiment and arrow just to bring some more darkness into the page to match the photos. But they did look a little bit stark down there on their own, so I am just going to add a couple more of those little daisies. Just again, I want the dark black, but I want it a little bit softer than it's appearing at the moment, and adding those flowers definitely does that. So I'm now going to move on to the two clusters on either side of my photos, and again I decided that they sort of needed that grey sort of darker colour as well picked up into those. So I end up getting the two little sprigs of leaves out of the exclusive cut apart sheet. And what I ended up doing by putting those there beside the two photos, it kind of almost circles the page in that sort of dark grey, black colouring. And I really like how that sort of evens out the spread of those colours around the page. I then just pulled out one of the acrylic hearts that came in the kit and one of the little love hearts from the Unforgettable Ephemera. So I've got quite a bit of all of the different parts of the kits happening in today's layout. I've used the stencil, I've used the exclusive card file, I've used the exclusive cutter parts, and I've used the ephemera from the Unforgettable collection, along of course with the paper. So there's quite a bit going on here. It's a very busy little layout, but I think it works. I don't think it's too much in your face. I hope it's not anyway. So just busy trimming down my foam so that I can hide that behind the flowers there. I obviously don't want the foam sticking out. And I did just put a little bit of glue on the end of each of those leaves. So the tips pop up just a little bit of the end of the leaf there, just to give a little bit of dimension to the page. There's quite a lot of dimension going on here because the tricycle is stuck up on foam, and then the extra little daisies on top of the tricycle are stuck up on more foam. So it is quite a thick little layout. But I really love dimension, as you can obviously imagine. And I just love the way adding dimension to your page just really gives it a lift. So once I have stuck all those on, I just go back and put a few enamel dots in the center of each of those daisies again. And I use the really tiny enamel dots for the little flowers, and I use the medium-sized enamel dots for the larger flowers. And no rhyme or reason, just sharing the colours around, basically, using what I had left, pretty much, because I love enamel dots. And I am finished, so I'm going to bring that up for you to have a closer look so you can check it out up close. I hope you have enjoyed watching this layout and seeing it come together. There's quite a lot going on, so hopefully it is something that you can get a few tips and tricks from, and I will see you next time. Thanks everyone for watching. Bye.